This wasn't just a crash. It was a controlled demolition of trust of lives and of the illusion that anyone was actually watching the system. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't an accident. It was a slow-motion train wreck engineered over decades, built on greed, willful blindness, and a mountain of fake money disguised as innovation. When it finally collapsed, it didn't just take down Wall Street. It took homes, jobs, savings, and futures. But the most dangerous part was this. The people who caused it walked away richer. If you were an ordinary person in 2008, you were probably blindsided. One week the headlines were talking about rising home prices. The next week banks were imploding, pensions were evaporating, and the stock market was in freefall. Suddenly your government was handing out billions. Not to you. Not to the workers who lost everything. But to the very institutions that engineered the collapse. The 2008 meltdown is often explained using technical words. Subprime lending, credit default swaps, securitization, systemic risk. But when you strip away the complexity, it's the oldest story of all. A story of money and power unchecked and unaccountable. Let's rewind. In the early 2000s, Wall Street had a problem. The tech bubble had burst. The economy was unstable. Investment banks were hungry for the next big engine of profit. They found it in real estate. Buying a home wasn't just the American dream. It had become the American addiction. And Wall Street figured out how to mass produce it. The tool was simple: the mortgage-backed security. Banks would take thousands of home loans, bundle them into a single product, and sell it as a low-risk investment. It sounded safe. It seemed guaranteed. Because it was supposedly backed by real houses. But to keep the profits flowing, they needed more loans. More buyers. More mortgages. When they ran out of qualified borrowers, they stopped caring altogether. No income verification. No proof of employment. Adjustable rates designed to explode later. Subprime loans for anyone who could sign their name. It didn't matter because the risk was supposedly spread out. Except it wasn't. Behind the curtain lurked the second layer of bets. Credit default swaps. Insurance policies that allowed investors to gamble on whether borrowers would fail. A market built on the hope of collapse. The more homeowners struggled, the more money these traders could make. And the referees, the rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, instead of warning the world, they stamped toxic assets with the safest AAA labels. Because they were paid by the same banks selling these products. A conflict of interest so massive it poisoned the global economy. By 2005, the housing market was a fever dream. Prices rising far beyond wages. Empty neighborhoods full of newly built houses. Speculators flipping properties they never intended to live in. It created the illusion of prosperity. But it was a bubble ready to burst. And then it did. Adjustable mortgages reset. Payments spiked. Defaults skyrocketed. The value of mortgage-backed securities plunged. Suddenly the banks that claimed everything was safe were drowning in losses. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Bear Stearns vanished. AIG, one of the giants of global finance, crumbled under the weight of its own bets. These were not small firms. These were the pillars of the world economy. Panic spread. Banks refused to lend to each other. Markets froze. Liquidity evaporated. Millions lost their jobs and their homes. Americans lost over $19 trillion in household wealth. But the bailout wasn't for the people. It was for the system. The government pumped trillions into the financial sector. TARP, the Federal Reserve Emergency Lending Hidden Facilities. The goal was simple: save the system. Not the citizen. Not the worker. Not the family losing their home. Wall Street executives rewarded themselves with bonuses funded by taxpayer rescue money. The architects of the crash walked away untouched. It wasn't just a failure. It was a betrayal. Years passed, but the machinery that caused the crisis only grew more powerful. Central banks created trillions through quantitative easing. Money out of nothing pumped directly into financial markets. Asset prices soared. Stocks rose. Housing became more expensive. The wealthy multiplied their fortunes. But wages stagnated and inequality worsened. Then came 2020, a global pandemic. Governments printed more money in 2 years than in the decade before. Zero interest rates, stimulus checks, emergency loans. For a moment it looked like a new chapter. But the consequences arrived fast. Inflation surged. Not temporary. Not mild. But entrenched, stubborn, and global. Central banks reversed course. Interest rates shot up. Markets dropped. Debt became a burden again. The same structural cracks we saw in 2008 reappeared. Only now they were bigger. Corporate debt was at record highs. Governments deeper in deficit. Consumers living on credit. Financial institutions larger and even more opaque. Crypto boomed and crashed. Fintech repackaged old risks as shiny innovations. But the core remained unchanged. A system built on debt. A system that refuses to let failures fail. A system where regulators are outmatched and decision makers are captured. A system where ordinary people bear the cost every time the cycle resets. So, what can we learn? Complexity is not safety. The more complicated the structure, the easier it becomes to hide danger. Incentives shape outcomes. If bankers know they will be rescued, they will always gamble harder. If politicians fear market crashes more than public anger, they will protect institutions, not families. Financial literacy is survival. You don't need to be an expert. But you do need to understand the game. Learn to spot bubbles. Learn to question narratives. Ask who profits, who risks, and who pays when the music stops. Because it always stops. The 2008 crash was not a once-in-a-lifetime event. It was a warning. A preview of what happens when unchecked power meets unlimited leverage. The next crisis is not a question of if, only when. And when it comes, there will be bailouts, inflation, volatility, and spin. But justice will be absent unless people truly understand the system they live in. Real wealth is not only money. It is knowledge, awareness, and resilience. The ability to see the storm coming and stand firm when it arrives. Because the system will not warn you. The headlines will not save you. But history will teach you. If you are willing to listen. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I am here to show you where to look.